I've finally discovered it. It took me 9 full months. I received this Palstar LA-1K amplifier in February of 2025, and here it is, November of 2025. And finally, today was the first day of discovering for certain that I have success when it comes to avoiding the overdrive. What do I mean by that? Well, I have this Icom IC-7300, and supposedly the IC-7300 is notorious for overshooting the power output settings. So for example, if I go up here and I have my power set to 35, it may be at 35 watts most of the time, but for brief periods it may shoot up to 70 or even 100 watts. Right now I've got it on 15, but like if I were to go up to 35, which was a typical setting for me, it would briefly jump up to 70 or higher, and once you reach 70 watts, then you'll start tripping the automatic shutoff, the protection circuit for this Palstar LA-1K, and it would show overdrive flashing on the screen. And that's because the Icom IC-7300 supposedly would have lots of overshoot. Well, I'm going to go ahead and turn this back down to 15%, about 15 watts, which is what I use for certain testing procedures. I'm going to come back to that in a moment. So what am I going on about here? What did I discover? Well, I watched a number of videos online, read forums, did some testing, some studying, looked in the owner's manuals for my equipment, and finally I found that if I have the ALC on the amplifier set to approximately -4, I know it displays -4 on the screen, but if I go to menu and I'm looking at the ALC, it's at 350, which is at almost the -4 setting there. And -4 volts is the maximum that the IC-7300 is designed to use. Turns out, even with the compression turned on with the Icom IC-7300, which I'm going to talk about here in a moment, I was able to avoid, I would estimate, about 90% of the overdrive issues. So during the 9 months that I've had this amplifier, I would start to transmit with it. It would say, okay, I'm at 800 watts, no big deal. It's made to go up to 1,000. I would not intentionally use this for QSOs at 1,000 watts. But with that overshoot from the Icom transceiver, this amplifier would start shooting way up for a certain number of milliseconds, long enough to trip it, and then it would go down to whatever power the transceiver was putting out. So it would briefly trip it, and then I would be transmitting at just like 35 watts, for example, when here I was trying to use 800, and then I would have to release the microphone on the Icom and then go back to transmitting again, and then all of a sudden it would realize, no wait, you're only putting in 35 watts, everything's fine, this is not an overdrive scenario, and then it would go ahead and put out the full power of 800 watts or whatever I had tuned up for. Well, finally, with turning up the ALC to the -4 setting, or 350 for the setting here for the base value, instead of 200, which is what I had previously had it set to, thankfully I was able to eliminate almost all of the overdrive scenario. I had QSOs today with the compression turned on with my Icom IC-7300 set the way that the instruction manual directed me to. Now your microphone and your radio may be different. Your voice is going to be different, obviously, than mine. But for my particular radio, my microphone, my voice, and so forth, I needed to have the settings that you see on the screen in order to match the settings that are in the owner's manual. Now, there is some debate about whether you want to follow the owner's manual or not for that, if maybe you should have a little bit lower setting anyway. But I decided to go for it, and I received many, many excellent audio reports. I heard many compliments about how excellent my audio was. But before I get too deep into that, I just wanted to mention having the compression on today, testing it out with a QSO, there was only one time where there was an overdrive issue. So thankfully, the ALC eliminated most of the situation. However, once I turned the compression off, as you see now, compression is off. It was at setting 7, so it's nice. The Icom IC-7300 remembers what your previous setting was. And then you can just turn it back on if you choose to. But in any case, with the compression off, I had a long QSO and one or two other brief QSOs, and I did not have any more overdrive issues at all. So finally I've solved it. For those of you out there who are trying to stop that overshoot for your Icom IC-7300 and you're using an amplifier, that's basically what you have to do. Turn the compression completely off and set your ALC accordingly. So if you can set it at -4 volts or at least pretty close to it, I do recommend, if you have a Palstar LA-1K, that you follow the instruction manual. It tells you very clearly how you adjust it. But just brief summary, what you want to do is you want to transmit. It tells you which mode to use and all of that, at which time to get it all set up. And you want to start turning up the ALC until you see just a slight drop in the output power. And then you know that you are at the right threshold. Now it's nice because on my LA-1K, I can see the output power here in a relative graph. The scale that's on the screen right now goes from 200 watts up to 1400. Obviously, I wouldn't be using that many. I shoot for around 800, which is pretty close to the middle there. And then I also have the Palstar HF Auto antenna tuner. And as you'll see here, it will show you the power peak. Right now I'm not transmitting, of course, so it shows the power peak of 0. But those are some checks and balances that I use to get an idea of what my output power is, and that was very helpful for when I was tuning. I also was running it through a watt meter dummy load, and so that way I could also compare with the dummy load, and that was one where it would give me a setting for the peak power as well as a setting for the average power, and I could get a really good idea of how the power output was and when I wanted to stop turning up my ALC over here on the amplifier. Okay, a couple other quick notes about the settings on my Icom IC-7300. Well, with that, as you can see, I have my mic gain at 50%. That was following the instructions in the manual. The compression was set to 7, and that worked great for me, except for the overshoot issue. But you know what? I did some testing tonight, and I found out my audio was great, whether with the compression on or with it off, other than I was told that my audio sounded less punchy, but still excellent with the compressor off, and my signal strength was just the same as before. So that makes sense, and I'm glad that I had that experience. All right, so again, for any of you out there who are having those overshoot issues with the IC-7300, don't worry, just make sure you have your compressor off, or at the very least, turn the ALC to the proper setting if you can do so with your amplifier. Well, thank you everyone, and I hope you have an amazing time with your next QSOs. This is Jared, Alpha Charlie 7, Whiskey Hotel, Backyard Ham Radio, 73.